that has a huge impact on the nation. We've got to be sensible with the public, and we have not. The government has not been sensible with the public. You're paying people not to work is going to increase inflation, which hits cost of living. But then we have the twin effect of the Russian invasion as well, which made this so much worse. But what is the solution, I would say, to getting out of the cost of living crisis? And for me, as a good red-blooded conservative, it's about jobs. And people with better jobs, better quality of jobs. And when you survey our job markets and the UK's place in the world, I don't think by itself we can get those better quality of jobs unless we have a whole new sector to invest in. And we are almost blessed with the opportunity, and I mean the opportunity of climate change, because there's a whole new market now, which is still nascent where it's going, where there are those new jobs, high-paid, high-skilled technical jobs that we can actually upskill the UK population to furnish. And because of climate change by its nature is a global crisis, the whole world wants the same technology. The whole world needs the same skills. So we have a great opportunity, I'm using an opportunity in the UK to actually be at the forefront of this technology, to try and help grow us out of this crisis. So we talked about the jobs already, and with the UK, we mentioned 40% of our energy last year was created by renewables. We are increasing 200,000 jobs in renewable technology. We are going to increase that. Obviously, we need to rehearse the arguments about EVs or hydrogen, for instance, all these new technologies, which the UK still has a great global place to forward, which we can develop technologies and sell. But one thing I want to touch on, which the panel I think has touched on, is also individual responsibility. We're in a new government now. It's all about individual responsibility and usage. It's one of those words which no one actually really wants to talk about, really. We mentioned briefly about turning down the boiler flow temperature, which is very unsexy, but actually very important. If everyone who has a combi boiler did turn their boiler down by 20 degrees or something, it makes absolutely no difference to the water in your taps or the heat coming out of a radiator. But it's going to save 10% of your gas bills. Surely everyone should be doing that. And I'd say actually the government, why is there not a government information campaign akin to something going on in COVID saying, turn down your boiler flow temperature? I mean, genuinely, how many people know how to turn down their boiler flow temperature? Put your hands up. How many people actually know where the knob is? Okay, for about half, just about half. That's still a large.
Just like self-sucking audience.
But I wouldn't know. Most people know what even the knob is to turn on that. Where is the information campaign saying, if you want to save 10% of your bills in cold boiler, here's how to do it? And suddenly we open that conversation up. Likewise, energy efficient methods. We hear as soon as a government minister talks about energy efficiency or using less energy, we're going this bizarre conversation where people are saying, oh, you have to wear an extra jumper. But that's not what we're talking. We're just to use energy responsibly. And I think one of the greatest failures in energy policy of the last 10 years is the smart meter rollout. That's been an absolute disaster. And nobody wants it. I don't even have a smart meter. And I like all this stuff because it's complex, doesn't really work properly. It's just completely shocking. If we all have smart meters, we can monitor energy usage. But that's individual. But then I look at the companies, and like some companies, I'm going to name like Octopus, Nest, are doing a very good job about telling people how to cut down their energy usage. But I wouldn't say who my energy supplier is. It's not Scottish, so don't worry about that. They never tell me what I should be doing to actually save money and help with the cost of living crisis. It's all about sort of using less. But I don't know what is, for instance, using more power. Is my washing machine or my dryer using more power? Or my television? Is my television on standby? How much power is that using? I don't know this. And I haven't got the information out there that wants to do it. So how can we make those informed choices? And if we make those informed choices by energy usage, then we can save money and we can also help the environment. And I think there's this big problem, lacuna, in what we're discussing about energy. We're not actually talking about individual responsibility and how we use energy and technology. We have the technologies available to us to actually cut down on our costs, but we're not actually using it. It's almost some relevance to the technology we're using. We're trying to go with the silver bullets of maybe even CCUS, but we're not looking at the easy stuff we can do. We're talking about the costs of insulating our homes, which is a huge amount of cost and time, but we're not talking about how you can actually save 20-30% of your home just by quite simple measures. And I think that is actually what going to sort of the charitable sector who are putting pressure on the government. You should be focusing on telling the government to use those public information campaigns. And we saw during COVID, public information campaigns in France are doing a huge amount of work at the moment on trying to cut down energy usage. Try and do that. And if we tell people it's going to save you money, that's how we save the environment. Because the last thing we should ever talk to people and the population is about carbon. Carbon is the worst word in the environment industry. It scares people. It puts people off. It makes it sound complex. If you just say you go and do this, it'll save money. That's what we want to talk about. I don't want to. I've seen quite a few of these panels. I just wish we didn't talk about net zero or carbon, because that turns people off. That scares people, especially when they're thinking about the difference between heating and eating. We need to just talk about how it saves you money, because we know a green environment, a low carbon lunch is a warmer, more energy efficient, better quality of life. And that's what we should be selling, a better quality of life, rather than net zero.
Thank you very much. And I'm very keen to come on to that question about public information and the challenge you posed to every element of the panel. But I'm promised to be slightly obstreperous, I suppose. I'm concerned that there's too much consensus on the panel. Essentially, we all basically agree that you can achieve both goals at the same time, that you can reduce carbon, you cut carbon and cut costs. But there may be people in the room, there certainly are people, I'm sure, at this conference who would say it's not always as lovely and rosy as that, is it? So to hone in on the example that everybody's cited in different ways, energy efficiency. Now, it is true that if I lag my loft, then I will reduce my energy usage and my energy bills will go down next year and the year after that and the year after that. But the pound I spend on lagging today is a pound that I can't spend on a loaf of bread down the road. I mean, that's day one economics 101. So there is a trade-off over time. We have upfront costs, and time when the cost of living is under pressure. Isn't it fair to say that some people can't afford the upfront costs of decarbonisation? Therefore, addressing the cost of living is going to have to take priority over decarbonisation. You tell me I'm wrong.
No, I'm itching. I cannot believe that the government missed the opportunity over the summer to do a massive energy efficiency insulation programme. We knew that we had this problem coming. We knew it was coming. We've had the war coming. We knew we had Martin Lewis on the telly every day telling us, and the costs were going up and up and up. As Keith said, we've now got this intervention, which we all welcome, because of course we don't want anybody to be cold this winter, but it's a sticking plaster. If we'd have only just had a teeny bit of foresight over the summer, when people were worried, and therefore they would have been more open to having their homes insulated, because that's actually one of the biggest barriers of people like, I don't want the hassle, I don't want my loft, I don't want all of this stuff. We could have had some investment from the government, which would have had long-term impacts. Instead, we've missed that opportunity and we put the sticking plaster in. As I say, it's welcome back. It was just an open goal politically to do it. It would have been hit all of those targets. So whilst I don't disagree with that, WF should shout more about individual doing it, the government had a prime opportunity, and I think they absolutely missed it over the summer. And it's a real shame, because to say we're going to be back here again, and we could have been upscaling our houses, having more people out there lagging the lofts, having an investment, and not paying whoever big energy companies to ensure, that we have a short-term sink plaster. So I think that is where I disagree.
Well, on that point, I'm going to come to Keith. I'm going to come to Sam Alexander on this before I come to Keith on that, because actually there's an additional layer of motivation on energy efficiency, which I think we haven't really touched on yet. And as Keith pointed out, the way the government has structured the energy guarantee, this is a particular question for Conservatives. The way the guarantee has been structured, every unit of energy that's now used in this country costs the taxpayer some money, because the public finances are meeting a portion of the cost of each unit. And so the more energy we use, the more the taxpayer is exposed. Now, again, I'm old and out of touch, but once upon a time, I remember the days when the Conservative Party was concerned with minimising public spending, and I know. But it's a question, challenge to Sam Alexander in particular. Given the case that Katie set out for energy efficiency, plus the new fiscal imperative to reduce demand, why aren't we seeing much more enthusiastic embrace of demand reduction from a Conservative government, if that's what we still got?
It's a very good question. I think that
that immediate of the energy price guarantee and the speed with which the government acted was very welcome. I probably would have had a taper towards the upper end of the spectrum, because I think that probably wealthier people could potentially afford to pay more towards it. But along the sort of policy exchange model, I don't know if you've seen that one. I mean, you've kind of got to the heart of the challenge here, which is that this decade right now requires a lot. It's very capital intensive and will require a lot of the transition capital intensive and will require a lot of investment from government. Now, we will all benefit down the line and quite quickly down the line. I mean, if we achieve the rollout of renewables at the speed that Keith is pledging to do, and if we achieve, the various targets of the energy security strategy, we will benefit this decade. But delivering that initial slug of government cash, and obviously energy efficiency is the prime example. When you have all these other priorities at the same time, it's tricky. So, I don't know, as parliamentary scrutineer of energy policy, we've now got there's a triple benefit, isn't there? You save carbon, you save public household costs, and save taxpayer money from demand reduction. So why aren't they doing it?
Because I think the narrative in this country is completely wrong about demand reduction. Because as soon as I mention you talk about demand reduction, you get the media talking about sort of people putting on jumpers and you can't use it. I would say we need to go to more of a sensible, serious model and looking at energy in the same way we look at water. We've had a hosepipe ban for most of the country over the summer, most part of the country. Yes, there is some grumbling, for the better word, understandably, but it hasn't had papers, public up in arms about it, because people are used to hosepipe bans every now and again. It's hot, we run out of water a bit, we can reduce it. We've never had a sensible conversation in this country about electricity because we've relied on dirty hydrocarbons, because there has been that plentiful supply. But I don't think we actually got the public to realise actually we're moving to a greener energy. We are not burning as much coal. It's bad for the environment. So actually we need to have these measures sometimes. And just like with water, occasionally you have to limit certain elements of it. We have to take the sensible approach. And generally before a hosepipe ban, the companies announce there might be a hosepipe ban, and then actually there generally is a decrease in usage of water, because people think, okay, I don't want a hosepipe ban, so I will do my little part of turning the tap off when I clean my teeth. Maybe we should have more messaging about that, to say there might be down the line, so people will think, okay, I'm going to just turn off those devices, I'm going to decrease my boiler flow rate and temperature, and things like that. We need to have that sensible conversation without scaring people the lights are going to go off. And I think people, I think, oh my God, if you're talking about demand reduction, we're about to have blackouts and riots and the like, without actually sensible saying it is our duty to treat electrons like green water molecules. And that is a failure over, well, forever, about how we treat and how the government and our public understands electricity.
And of course, the great one is we're more likely to have blackouts if we don't have significant demand reduction this winter. So essentially the message of the government: man up and tell people we're a jungle.
Isn't that obviously the last thing we should be saying?
I used to, so you know, I used to be a journalist for a long time, so I plead guilty to simplification, polluting public discourse. Just on this question before I come to the audience, I was you put this back to Keith. Just underline, I guess, the strength of the case for energy efficiency and demand reduction. I think it's worth taking a step back, because in your opening remarks, you talked about let's have a massive push on energy efficiency and demand reduction. To be absolutely clear, you are arguing for more policies that would mean that people buy less of the stuff that you make and sell. It's that important, isn't it? You're trying to cut your own sales.
It is, yes, we are, yeah. And that's been the case for quite a number of years. But it's a good thing. It's a sensible thing. And I think you're coming back to some of your challenges around it. I think right now, if there was a bigger energy efficiency support package for vulnerable people, we should be pushing that very, very aggressively and delivering those messages to those homes to, at the very least, make them warmer and more comfortable to live in. Interestingly enough, in the run-up to the energy price guarantee, when the prices were going up and there was the forecasts of looking at £4,500, £5,000, people were talking about £6,000 for a bill, we actually saw it start to change people's behaviours quite significantly. We saw a big uplift in people looking at heat pumps. We saw a big uplift in people looking at solar panels, a big uplift in people looking at batteries, looking to try and manage, for those people who can afford those things, looking at them trying to manage their usage at home. The one criticism you can have at the energy price guarantee is that there is no usage tapering. And I think this is something the government can look at. It can look at this, one, to manage the cost of the scheme, but two, to send signals, which is when your usage hits a certain level, you should start paying a higher rate. And it will start to influence people's behaviour. People will start to behave in a different way if they see that, if they know if they hit certain rates, that actually they get charged more for the product. And we should definitely be looking at doing that. I think there's a whole load of stuff we can do around new houses and house building still in the UK. I still think we don't build particularly energy efficient homes in this country. And we will end up in, the houses we're building today in 10 years' time, we'll end up having to retrofit them, which is just like horrific from a cost point of view. And we're still building houses in this country that are not heat pump ready, which is bonkers, completely bonkers. We've set up a heat business. The guy put in charge of the heat business, God bless him, decided he just moved into a new home and decided he would have a heat pump fitted. And he's had to rip the house apart to get it done because the house is built with concrete floors. Try putting the pipe work into that. It's impossible. You end up having to do all sorts of weird and wonderful things to your home to get it done. That's just crazy. These houses should all be getting built ready for all of this. And we need to, that's where markets are great. I love markets and I love competition. But there is also a massive role for policy and regulation to steer the market and control the market. And it's in areas like that where policy and regulation can be such a huge driver of behavioural change. We've seen it. We've seen it with the policy announcement around you're not going to buy a petrol and diesel car brand new after 2030. And you see the impact it's had on the industry, on the car industry. You see the impact it's had on people's behaviour. If we do something the same, around house building, you'll see the change. If you can drive behaviour incredibly quickly if you think through these things carefully and cleverly. I know, and I supported a massively speedy, quick intervention in terms of the energy price guarantee, but given it's a 2-year promise, there is time to change it and to taper it and to play about with it. And I think that's something seriously the government needs to look at.
Yeah, can I just ask Sam about this? Because Sam was the architect.
Conversation breaking out.
Sorry.
Yes, you can. Then we're going to come towards that, and then I'm going to get some questions from you.
Just because I think Keith raises a really good point on house building. You did a really good job on and you took personally with the author of the 2030.
So nice.
Well, you did a great job coming to the fight.
Good.
House building. Why didn't you do anything on this? Look, Deepden says it was the worst policy intervention from the Conservative government since 2010. You single-handedly undermined it. What stops you putting those making our housing?
Do you mean the total scrapping of zero carbon homes?
Well, the definite scrapping, the downgrading of Osborne. But anyway, but why didn't you do more about that when you had the opportunity? Because you were really good on some stuff. What stopped you making it?
We've got a question very quickly. Why do you feel so badly, Sam?
Well, we did make some progress, and if you look at the sort of Part L regs, the changes that were brought through, we effectively now do have the zero carbon home standard. That'll be in from 2024, I think. So it's coming. It is happening.
Slow for it, right? Good. Score draw on that one. Alexander, I want to come on last point.
I just want to make one last point. We're talking quite in negative terms about cost of living and net zero. We should also look at homes and aspects of the positive, of how people can make money from net zero. And I'm mainly thinking about people using the homes and assets. We're talking about solar panels. We're talking about insulation. We're talking about saving energy. But when we're producing energy on our homes, like maybe we're using like Smart Export Guarantee, we want to encourage people to actually use their homes to make money by creating energy and selling it back to the grid. And there needs to be far more focus actually on the government and the policy saying actually you can use your home or car as an asset, which then will create energy, which then you can sell back to the grid. And actually turn around and say, you can solve the cost of living crisis by turning your asset, the biggest asset you probably own, into a money positive aspect, and more of that conversation as well.
Good, that's a good topic for. There's a think tank paper in that. We should do. Right, I've got back to you. My hand's going up, so I'm going to try and do questions in groups. So I can currently see 5. I can do 6. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. There, the sedentary members, and then the sign it back. So they're there. We do some crisp questions. We'll try and get through 2 batches.
Sarah from CPRE, the Countryside Charity. Why has the government lifted the moratorium on fracking when the Chancellor himself recognises that it will do nothing to address the cost of living crisis and will obviously be very deeply unpopular among rural communities?
Fracking, question mark. Gentleman there.
Yeah, hi, David Buckman, representing Utility Week magazine. Keith touched on the reform of the wholesale market. In the previous session I was in, there was a lot of concern expressed about rushing that reform and ending up with, I suppose, the botched reform.
Yeah.
Do you share those concerns? And also, amidst the current market turmoil, are there concerns about the future impact of borrowing costs on investment in renewables?
Okay, and they here.
Hi, Kate Young from the Aldersgate Group. There's an incredibly persuasive case from the panel about how cost of living, energy security and levelling up can all be achieved by net zero. So why does the panel think the government have not made major signals on energy security, energy efficiency, renewable deployment, grid capacity, etc.?
Right, okay, we're trying to do this in order. Does anyone on the panel like fracking?
I would.
No.
I have 2 fracking sites in my constituency.
Oh, how's that working for you?
They don't like it. Basically, understand. We don't like fracking. I think this is a mistake by the government. Fracking. I also would be very surprised if fracking actually goes ahead anywhere. I think this is a red herring, to be honest. Especially once they've got the community consent in. I think the communities will not want fracking, and I just don't see. I think it's more of a red herring. We're 10 years behind technology anyway. It will not make a difference.
Anyone go?
It's a distraction.
I'll be astonished.
Yeah.
If it goes there.
Lovely. Keith, there's a question directly to you, particularly on wholesale program rates. I'm quite keen to get a thoughts from everybody else. We've touched on this question. Essentially, the price of electricity is not set according to how much it costs. So the price of electricity, I'm sure you all know this, is actually set according to the cost of gas. So at the moment, Keith's turbines are generating energy at a pretty low cost. But the electricity they generate is being sold at the price of gas, and so you're paying more. And there's a question, and this was when it came up at the Labour Party last week when we did this session. There too, there's a general sense growing across politics that maybe we might want to have a look at that market structure as to how it works. But I equally are concerned that if it is done quickly and badly, we could end up making a bit of a mess. So that I think is the context to the question. So I'll start with Keith's answer to that. But if anybody else on the panel has thoughts on the fast-moving subject of the energy market reform, then we can chip in. But Keith,
It's a wonderfully exciting
It
topic.
is.
The last time we informed the market, the man at the back of the room was Energy Minister. And he was a brilliant Energy Minister. Now, it's the market was created for a world where we predominantly burn coal and gas to generate electricity, and we've not done a big reform of the wholesale market and the trading arrangements since then. So we had a process years and years ago called NITA and BETA, which were 2-year-long big reviews to restructure the wholesale market. And right now that structure doesn't work particularly well given where we are as a country. The market's coped, and it's not been a huge issue because it was a relatively benign market for a period of time and prices were low, and it wasn't a huge issue. The volatility in the market just now has brought the issues to do with the structure of the market home to roost. And so yes, I generate renewable energy. I will generate it at say £50, but it gets sold into the wholesale market. And it gets turned into £450 if that's what the price is. The retailers, if you retail gas and electricity, you are massively incentivized to buy what's called firm power, which is an absolute guarantee of an amount of power half hour by half hour to meet your customer demand. The only way to buy that firm power is in that wholesale market, and that wholesale price is dominated by the cost of gas. So if you're a retailer and you need to know your exact demand profile for a day, half hour by half hour. You cannot buy that demand profile from a wind farm. It's impossible. It just doesn't work that way. So that's why it gets converted that way. Can you fix it? Yes. The government have kicked off the next version of Nita Beta. It's called REMA, the review of the electricity market. But the difficulty is that's an 18-month, 2-year process. So is there a quick fix? Potentially, yes. There is potentially a way of stripping out the older renewable power out of the wholesale market and getting it straight directly at the cheaper price to customers and to customers' bills. What I would say to you is, just for absolute clarity, which is any of the more modern renewables projects built in the last 3 or 4 years under the contract for difference mechanism, that cheap power gets directly to customers. There is no uplift because it's done straight through that contract. So there's a conversation underway with government just now, you've probably read about it in the newspapers, to look at, can you flip the older renewables projects and shove them into some form of mechanism that strips them away from the wholesale market and gets the cheaper power directly to customers. It's being looked at. There are lots and lots of conversations underway, and I have got no doubt in one way, shape or form we will get there.
Yes.
Coming back, sorry, to the point the gentleman raised about rushing it, it is important not to rush it. I know speed is high up the agenda for the government. I understand why speed is high up the agenda for the government, but you are playing about with an incredibly complicated market. It might sound easy to do it, but it is not. And you're playing about with people who have invested projects on the back of promises and guarantees that were to last 15, 20, 25 years. You cannot afford to get this wrong, so it needs to be done incredibly carefully.
Thank you. You can see why one of the things kids is a visiting professor at Strathclyde University. He's just managed to capture what he's, I speak to him as a think tank, probably one of the most complicated bits of public policy out there in about 3.5 minutes. So thank you very much. I'm not going to force the rest of the panel to have developed views on REMA unless they really want it, because we've got one last question to address, which is essentially, really, I'm going to kind of recap the question: why on earth haven't government done more energy? Is it just a sort of philosophical objection to tell you to the risk of people seem to tell people what to do? The libertarian belief that we're all rational econs who can be trusted to make the right choice, and eventually we'll minimise our own use anyway.
Why asking? Actually, I don't know why they haven't done more, but frankly, and they should have more public information campaign. And I think there is a failure of the governments that we have. We need to talk more about it, but there is that fear that you've been going through the conversation of telling people to put jumpers on and blackouts and things like that, which scares people. We need to have more adult conversations.
Grown-up conversation. Excellent. Right, I know there's 3 people earlier on, so you've all 5. There's 5 now. I'm trying to remember who they were. There's a gentleman there in the blue shirt, one also standing, and then actually I can see. Let's do 4 in one go. So 1, 2, 3, 4.
My name's Hayden Bagson from National Energy Action, National Fuel Quality Charity. I just take issue with Alexander Stafford's sort of characterisation that we need more of a public campaign around reducing energy usage. I mean, I don't disagree with that to a certain extent, but I mean, we represent people who are low incomes, often also disabled people who, reducing their electricity consumption just isn't an option. For example, people on dialysis, people with stair. So do you accept that whilst that might be important for, able to pay market, there's also groups in society that really need better price protection in the market, and that actually we should be taking on the recommendation from Scottish Power around the social tariff in the energy market as well?
Right, necessary but not sufficient condition is the question. People there.
So my name is David Kent. I'm from Equinor, it's a Norwegian energy investor in the UK. Things like Dogger Bank wind farm and hydrogen, CCUS and Humber. Panel was up before this. The theme was the death of levelling up as a government agenda item. The panel things you touched, or is it all going to be left to the private sector?
Not the gentleman also standing.
Councillor Simon Ball from Rotherham. I use a time of use tariff. It's brilliant for offsetting for peak times. Means I'm using renewables at night time. Should all power companies supply a time of use to offset that usage at peak times, thus reducing demand?
And then there's a lady here, I think. Yeah.
Sorry. Bernie Savage from the National Union of Students. So we did a survey earlier in the year that found students have usually got about £50 left to pay their bills after paying their rent, and that was before this all went through the roof. So do you think the government needs to do something to alleviate the cost of living for students, such as an immediate payment that is available for them?
Thank you. No, we've got about 4 minutes to try and answer your 4 questions there and then sum up. So I'm going to try and get through this in relatively constrained forms. I'm going to start. Could you answer just very briefly your question from National Energy Action about whether or not there needs to be something other than your public information campaign, particularly for people on
just not everyone's going to reduce their energy usage, and also in fact some energy want people to use more energy if they increase for business and jobs. Frankly, if you can use more energy to create more wealth and more jobs, that's a good thing to use it. Likewise, from dialysis or say we can't use it, but we have to look at the country as a whole. The country as a whole needs to make a cut down on usage, and then everyone who can do it should do it. But of course, people who are most vulnerable should always be looked after to make sure they have a good standard of living.
Right, I'm going to jump around. I want to come to the student questions. Anyone have any thoughts on whether or not students are especially deserving? Is there a special case for students in particular getting assistance here?
No.
No, good. Anybody else? No, fine. I'm afraid but I think you probably accept that everybody on the panel thinks that if students are in particular straitened circumstances, they should be covered by whatever policies are put in place to help people in those circumstances.
Let's not write students off completely. I'm not saying it's necessarily just for students. I think this is where it's important. One, moving to a social tariff, but two, in the interim, can you taper and tier the level of support we're giving? I say again, speed was of the essence. The policy's good, but we now have time to look at whether you shove slightly less of the money to the people that use lots and can afford to pay, and push more of the money to the people who are really struggling at the bottom.
So a good policy would help students because they need help, not because they are students.
Yes.
Okay, good. And I'm going to continue my confusing reordering of questions. Time of use tariffs. Can you, practitioner people,
yes. The simple answer, yes. And they were on their way. What I would say is there's now a little bit of a hiatus in the market because, in effect, everybody is going on what is in effect what's used to be called standard variable tariff, because we're going to fixed unit rates, etc. You aren't going to see any real product innovation in this market. If this carries on for 2 years and the support mechanism stays for 2 years, you can see little or no product innovation in the market for 2 years.
Because you're not competing with your rivals.
There is no competition in there, and there's no variation in when you use the power because it's just all in this fixed rate discounted tariff. So, but yes, once we get back to the normal world and we get out of this, that will absolutely happen. It will absolutely come to pass because. One, it will be a brilliant way of another part of energy efficiency, and what you talked about in terms of people using their power and making money out of their power. Time of use tariffs will be another fantastic way of doing that.
And now, well, thank you. We've got a minute left. I've left the Equinor question to last because it's a good sort of general up-sum challenge for you all. I think it essentially boils down to is net zero going to survive? Is the government going to remain? Is this government going to remain committed to net zero? So I'm going to go from right to left. So Sam, will this government continue to support net zero?
Yes, definitely. And I think if you pull back if you sort of lift up the hood and you look at the details of what the government has announced in the growth plan, we've already talked about the return of offshore wind. We talked about the expansion of eco. And they have doubled down on their commitment to rolling out more offshore wind as well. They're kind of basically pulling every lever, but they will remain committed to net zero for all the reasons that we talked about here, because the economics point in that direction.
And public opinion.
100%, it's not dead. It's very much alive for all the reasons we've said. It will remain because of all the opportunities. I think in terms of the investment question, which I think was secondary in yours, in terms of the energy companies clearly having a massive windfall in terms of profits right now, as we're talking about, and again they're getting investment from the government, which is not for this panel, but in terms of, I think for various reasons, we know that the model is not sustainable. It's not sustainable, and we're going to have to shift it up. I think we've had some creative suggestions on here, whether we flip the energy market on its head, whether Keith starts looking after homes and then demand in the round. But I think there is a duty and a responsibility on all of us, and companies are going to need to step up to that duty and responsibility, because at the end of the day, it's all of our planet we've got to save for us and our kids. We won't forget who did it and who didn't.
Thank you. I'm going to stop. Will Conservatives remain committed to net zero?
Yes, but Yes, but I also think it was going to be a slightly harder sell than it was on the previous regime. I think under Boris, it was very much a forefront of what his government was doing. Clearly, this is not as a big a priority as it was Boris. It was one of his top priorities. But it also goes back to individual responsibilities. There'll be a lot more emphasis on individuals, on the private sector stepping up now. You can't just rely on the government. We're out of the years of government giving us a solution to all our problems. It's time for us to be conservative again and stand up and help each other.
You have the last word to
Thank you. Yes, it'll survive. It'll survive not just because it didn't. In fact, actually, it doesn't matter whether you call it net zero, cost of living, whether you call it getting rid of gas from Russia, etc. It all ends up the same thing. And I'm pragmatic enough in life. I don't particularly mind whether they call it net zero or call it cost of living or call it winning the war with Ukraine. We'll get there. I don't think levelling up dead either. I think by the massive investment we need across the grid system, the massive investment in offshore wind. If you go to towns like Barrow and Furness and go out in the peninsula where there's a whole lot of offshore wind farms, and then go along that peninsula, there are now, 8, 9, 10 huge big offshore wind offices, maintenance projects out there as well. I think we'll see the same in the whole of the towns up and down the east coast of England, up Scotland, a massive wave of investment into infrastructure. That will bring jobs to those communities. I don't care, again, much whether you call it levelling up or you just call it infrastructure investment. That's what it will deliver.
Thank you. That's good. I'm going to bring things to a close there by thanking all of you very much for joining us, and thank everyone joining us via YouTube. Thank you, Keith and Scottish Power, for making this debate possible. And I'd maybe ask you all to join me in thanking all of the panels that are going to be Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much.